The morning he vanished, the air felt thin, like the city had stopped breathing. Frank Matthews stood by a motel window with the blinds half open. A gray sky hung low over New York. On the dresser sat a small bag, heavy with money, and 2 clean IDs. His court date was in a few hours. Federal agents would be waiting. Frank checked his watch, took one slow breath, and walked to the door. In the parking lot, a taxi idled with the light off. He stepped out, closed the door without a sound, and slipped into the back seat. The cab rolled toward the highway. When the motel phone rang upstairs, 3 short rings and a 4th, the room was empty. By the time agents reached the courthouse, a seat in the front row was still cold. Frank Matthews was gone. How did he do it? And who helped him disappear? To understand that quiet exit, you have to know the road that led there. Frank grew up in North Carolina, where the streets were hot in summer and everyone knew your name. He was sharp even as a kid. He watched, listened, and learned fast. He kept his shirts clean and his shoes even cleaner. As a teen, he worked small hustles, nothing wild, nothing loud. He liked to move in a straight line, and he liked to be the one drawing it. When he came to Philadelphia and then New York, the city light hit him like a switch. He started a barbershop front. He bought a used car lot. He made friends in every borough. People liked talking to him because he made them feel smart. He never bragged. He never shouted. He gave instructions the way some folks give directions to church. Clear and calm. Soon, Frank ran a network that stretched across state lines. He was young, stylish, and careful. The money moved the way trains move, on time and on tracks only he saw. With success came danger. Rivals watched his cruise. Men who smiled at him on Monday asked questions about him on Tuesday. And the feds watched too. They followed cars. They wrote down plate numbers. They pulled trash from alleys and picked out receipts with gloved hands. Frank noticed. He always noticed. He changed apartments often, switched phones, and never told the full plan to anyone. He believed the safest secret was the one you never said out loud. One night, a driver named Eddie brought word. A grand jury had met. Now the clock was running. Frank stared at the wall for a long time, then smiled like he had just solved a hard math problem. He told Eddie to rest. He told his girlfriend Cheryl to pack light. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. The next morning, he parked his favorite car 2 blocks away, wiped the wheel with a towel, and left the keys under the seat. He walked home by a different street and waved at a neighbor just like always. The feds built their case the slow way. They drew maps with red pins and blue strings. They traced calls. They flipped a small timer from Newark, who talked too much when he was scared. The case grew into a thing you could feel in your stomach. Frank knew they would try to make a show of him. They wanted cuffs, cameras, and a press line. He wanted none of it. Still, he lived light and normal on the surface. He ate breakfast at the same corner diner. He tipped in cash. He let Cheryl pick the music at night. But he also built a plan inside a plan. A second ID sat beneath the floorboard. A safe key hid behind the vent. He timed the trip from the motel to Kennedy Airport twice. Once in traffic, once in rain. He remembered both times. 2 days before his court date, a storm rolled in and made the sky look like wet stone. At midnight, a quiet knock sounded at the apartment door. Cheryl looked up from the couch. Frank held up a finger for silence. He moved to the peephole and saw nothing but a dark blur. The hallway light had been unscrewed. In the distance, a stair creaked. Down on the street, a van engine rumbled and then went quiet. Then came the shout from the hallway. Deep, clipped and certain, federal agents. Open the door. The door shook hard, once, twice, like thunder trapped in the hallway. Federal agents. Open up. The words hit Cheryl like ice water. She stood, hands shaking, eyes on Frank. He didn't flinch. He set his finger to his lips again, calm as a quiet song. Then he moved fast. He clicked off the TV, slid the lamp cord from the wall, and the room went dark except for a thin line of city glow leaking through the blinds. Another heavy hit. The chain on the door trembled. Frank leaned close to Cheryl and spoke in a low whisper. Remember what I told you. Light bag. No purse. No call to anyone. We walk, not run. She nodded, breathing quick. He lifted the corner of the rug, pulled up a loose floorboard with a butter knife, and reached into the small space below. 2 items came out, a plain envelope and a tiny metal key on a blue string. He tucked the envelope inside his jacket, then looped the key around his neck under his shirt. The door hit again. A voice on the other side counted down. 3, 2. Frank took Cheryl's hand and guided her to the kitchen. He opened a tall, squeaky cabinet, and behind a row of cans was a narrow service door few people ever noticed. Years ago, he had paid a handyman to fix the hinges and keep quiet. The hinges did not squeal now. The door swung into a slim shaft where old pipes ran down to the basement like iron vines. "Stay behind me," he whispered. They stepped into the shaft and closed the cabinet from the inside. Darkness wrapped around them. Frank moved by memory, one careful step at a time, feeling for the iron ladder he knew was there. His hand found the cold rungs. Down they went, 1, 2, 3 steps, and then a boom rattled the apartment above. The front door had given way. Voices poured in, boots stomping, drawers opening, men calling clear, and kitchen and bedroom. The sounds felt close and far at the same time, like a storm across a lake. On the ladder, Cheryl's shoe slipped. Metal scraped. Frank's hand shot back and steadied her ankle. "Easy," he breathed. "Almost there." They reached a small landing and a rusted hatch. Frank pressed his shoulder into it. The seal broke with a sigh, and a gust of cool air rolled up from below. The basement smelled like dust, oil, and rain. He guided Cheryl down and shut the hatch gently, laying an old bucket on top as if it had never moved. They crossed the basement through a forest of silent boilers and came to a gray door marked exit. Frank stopped. He listened with his whole body, head tilted, eyes soft. No voices, no radios, just the low hum of the building and the patter of rain outside. He pushed the door open to a narrow alley. The rain washed the city into soft shapes. Trash cans, a sagging fence, the glow of a street lamp at the corner. Frank led Cheryl under the awning. He checked his watch. "Right on time," he said, more to himself than to her. They didn't head to the front street, where patrols would be. They slipped the other way, through a delivery lane, and out behind a bakery, where the air smelled like warm bread. Frank tapped twice on a metal door. It opened a crack. A tall man in a white apron peered out, then stepped aside. "You didn't hear this from me," the man said without looking at them. Frank squeezed his shoulder in thanks. Through the bakery, past racks of rolls and a radio whispering baseball scores, they exited onto a different block. A yellow cab turned the corner and stopped like it had simply wandered there. Frank put Cheryl in first and slid in after. "Queens," he told the driver. "Van Wyck, Service Road." The driver nodded. The tires hissed along wet pavement. In the back seat, Cheryl stared at Frank. "How many places like that do you have?" "Enough," he said, "but we only need one today." The cab moved through the city like a shadow. Frank watched the mirrors. He counted lights. He looked for tails and found none. The rain helped blur everything, even fear. When they crossed a bridge, he let out a breath she didn't know he had been holding. At a quiet strip of storage buildings, they stepped out. Frank used a blue string key on a plain steel door. Inside, the unit held only 3 things: a brown suitcase, a shoebox, and a folded jacket. He opened the suitcase, clothes, a toothbrush, nothing flashy. Then he opened the shoebox. Inside lay a small stack of clean passports and a second envelope. He handed Cheryl the jacket and one ID. "From now on," he said softly, "you're Claire." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. He took her hand. "Last stop," he said. "Then we make the jump." He closed the storage door and turned, just as a black sedan with no plates slid into the far end of the lot, and its headlights snapped on, pinning them in 2 hard cones of white. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The rain shimmered in the headlights, turning into a curtain of white. Frank's eyes narrowed. The sedan's engine purred low and steady, like a cat ready to strike. Cheryl froze beside him, clutching the jacket. "Frank," she whispered, "is that them?" He didn't answer. His right hand went inside his coat, not for a weapon, but for the envelope tucked deep in the pocket. Inside it were 2 tickets and a thin stack of bills, carefully folded. He kept his tone calm, the same voice he used when teaching Cheryl how to breathe through fear. "Stay behind me," slow and quiet. The sedan's door opened with a heavy sound. 2 figures stepped out, men in long coats, faces hidden by the rain. For a moment, Frank thought they might be feds. But then one of them spoke, and the accent was all wrong. "You're a hard man to find, Frank." The voice was familiar, too familiar. It belonged to a man who used to sit 3 chairs down at his meetings, a man Frank once called friend. His name was Leon Carter, an old rival who'd turned against him years ago after a deal went bad. If Leon had found him, it meant one thing. Somebody had sold information. The feds weren't the only ones chasing him now. Frank smiled faintly, though his jaw tightened. "You still working nights, Leon?" he said, voice steady. Leon stepped closer, water dripping off his hat. "You're not as clever as you think, Frank. Everybody slips." "Maybe," Frank replied, "but not tonight." Leon chuckled darkly. "We'll see." Before he could say another word, Frank grabbed Cheryl's hand and pulled her toward the side gate. A flash of light from Leon's car caught the chain-link fence just as Frank shoved it open. They ran into the dark, shoes slapping puddles, breaths sharp in the cold air. Behind them came the shout, "Matthews!" "Stop!" They didn't stop. They cut through the narrow lane between warehouses, then turned a sharp corner where the alley opened to the main road. There at the curb, a green Plymouth waited, an older model with a dented bumper and no driver in sight. Frank ran to it, yanked open the door, and tossed Cheryl inside. He slid behind the wheel, twisted the key that was already there, and the engine roared. "Seatbelt," he said, pressing the pedal hard. Tires screeched. The Plymouth shot forward, headlights slicing through the storm. In the rear-view mirror, Leon's sedan spun out a lot and followed, fishtailing across the slick road. Cheryl looked at Frank, wide-eyed. Who were they? "People who don't take good news well," he said, eyes never leaving the road. They hit the freeway, merging with the few cars daring to drive through the rain. Frank drove with purpose. Never too fast, never too slow, just enough to blend. He exited near Kennedy Airport and parked under a broken streetlight 2 blocks from the main terminal. The rain was lighter now, more mist and storm. Planes blinked in the distance like slow-moving stars. He turned to Cheryl. "This is where we split." Her face went pale. "No, you said we'd leave together." "I said we'd make the jump," he corrected gently. "You'll take the flight to Miami under that new name. There's a man waiting at the terminal who'll help you. You trust him till you see me again." "But when—" she started. "When it's safe," he cut in, his voice firm but kind. "You know too much to stay, but I know too much to go with you." He handed her the envelope. "Everything you need is here. Don't look back." Cheryl's eyes filled with tears. "Frank." He touched her cheek, then smiled, not with joy but with calm. "The trick to living," he said, "is to stay one move ahead." She got out slowly, pulling her hood over her head. The airport lights shimmered in the mist as she disappeared into the crowd. Frank watched her go until the last trace of her red scarf faded in the fog. Then he pulled out another passport, this one under the name Raymond James. He stepped out of the car, walked into the shadows near the cargo gates, and vanished among the workers. Hours later, federal agents arrived at the airport. They found the Plymouth still running, wipers moving back and forth. Inside were 2 coffee cups, still warm, but there was no Frank Matthews. The next morning's headline screamed, "Drug Kingpin skips trial, $20 million missing." FBI agents traced leads from Miami to Venezuela, from Panama to Africa. They found whispers of sightings, a man who looked like Frank buying fish in Bahamas, another in a cafe in Paris. But nothing ever stuck. No body, no arrest, no proof. Some say he changed his face and lived quietly somewhere sunny. Others believe he was taken out by his own people. But for those who chase him, one truth still burns after 50 years. Frank Matthews didn't just run. He vanished. And the money? It vanished with him.